Emily and Jason Parker seemed like any other young parents in their quiet suburban neighborhood, but on one sweltering summer morning, their choices would push the boundaries of trust and safety. Left alone in a scorching car, their infant's life hung by a thread, while outside, the world carried on unaware. The morning began quietly, like so many others in the suburban neighborhood. Sunlight filtered through the trees, casting long, soft shadows on the streets. Birds chirped lazily, and the faint hum of early traffic drifted from the nearby highway. In one small house tucked between two identical homes, a baby slept peacefully in a car seat, completely unaware of the world outside. The air smelled faintly of breakfast, with toast burning slightly in the kitchen. For most families, it would have been a typical day, filled with ordinary routines, feeding, diaper changes, and quiet playtime. But in this house, the ordinary was about to take a dark turn. The parents moved through their morning with unusual haste, their actions deliberate but strange. Instead of focusing on the baby or preparing for the day at home, they seemed distracted by something else entirely. The father went to the garage first, unlocking the car with a casual, almost rehearsed motion. The mother followed, her steps brisk, as if the rhythm of their plan had been rehearsed countless times before. The baby, still groggy from sleep, let out soft coos, oblivious to what was happening. The parents secured the child in the car seat, making sure the straps were snug, almost mechanically. It was a picture of responsibility, if only the surrounding circumstances were different. What happened next seemed ordinary from the outside. The car door closed with a click, engine started, and the vehicle pulled out of the driveway. A neighbor watering her plants waved, seeing nothing unusual. Other neighbors began their routines, unaware of the danger unfolding just yards away. The parents drove not to a nearby store or a playground, but to a local bar, a place where alcohol flowed freely and time seemed to blur. The baby remained in the backseat, the world outside the car growing warmer with every passing minute. As the sun climbed higher, the temperature inside the car began to rise. Metal and glass trapped the heat, turning the vehicle into a suffocating box. Outside, life moved on in a rhythm of normalcy. A jogger passed by, his headphones masking the soft sounds from the car. A dog barked at a delivery truck, and someone pulled weeds from their garden. None of it seemed connected to the small, fragile life in the parked car. The baby, still strapped in, began to stir. Tiny fists batted at the air, lips quivering with discomfort. Each minute stretched longer, the danger invisible to anyone not looking closely enough. Inside, the parents were oblivious to the rising threat. The bar was loud, music thumping, voices carrying over the clinking of glasses. Their attention was absorbed entirely by themselves, their own enjoyment. Hours that might have been spent caring for their child dissolved into drinking and laughter, a stark contrast to the helpless vulnerability in the car. The baby's coos became cries, small but urgent, a signal of distress lost in the empty streets outside. By the time someone would notice, the situation had already escalated beyond a simple mistake. The ordinary morning, filled with light and quiet, had turned into the beginning of a crisis that no one could have ignored for long. The heat began to build quickly inside the car, wrapping the small space in a stifling, invisible pressure. The sun beat down relentlessly, turning the seats into scorching surfaces and trapping the warmth in a growing wave. The baby, so small and fragile, began to struggle against the restraints of the car seat, tiny limbs moving in desperate confusion. Sweat dampened the soft hair on the infant's head, and the cheeks flushed a deep, alarming red. Each passing moment made the air feel heavier, thick with the silent threat of danger. Outside, the day continued normally. Neighbors watered their gardens, joggers passed by in the shade, and the occasional car rolled slowly along the quiet street. None of them saw the tiny life trapped inside the vehicle. None could sense the urgency of the invisible clock ticking relentlessly forward. Inside the car, every sound was magnified. The baby's soft cries, initially tentative, began to rise, piercing the interior with small, urgent wails. The heat pressed down, making every breath a struggle, and the infant's energy drained rapidly. Tiny fists beat against the sides of the seat, a silent plea for help that could not reach anyone outside. The straps, once snug and protective, now felt like constraints in a growing, suffocating oven. The baby's movements slowed as exhaustion and the rising temperature began to take their toll. There was no one there to comfort, to pick up, to soothe, leaving the child entirely alone in the sweltering cabin. As the minutes stretched, the danger became more pronounced. The car, parked in direct sunlight, absorbed the heat, turning metal and glass into sources of unbearable warmth. Every surface seemed to radiate the day's intensity, reflecting and amplifying the sun's energy. The air inside thickened, heavy and oppressive, making the baby's struggle invisible to anyone outside but catastrophic within. Each breath grew shallower, the tiny chest rising and falling with increasing difficulty. Time, unnoticed by the world beyond the car windows, became a deadly force. Outside, the neighborhood continued its routine. Children played in yards just a few feet away, unaware of the peril so close. A neighbor walked her dog, laughing at a private joke, glancing only occasionally at parked cars. Cars came and went, their engines humming, oblivious to the quiet tragedy unfolding nearby. The contrast between the carefree world outside and the silent crisis inside the car was stark, a tension invisible yet suffocating in its intensity. Every second brought the baby closer to the edge, each moment a test of survival against the merciless heat. Inside the vehicle, the baby's cries began to weaken, small whimpers barely audible over the ambient noise of the day. The body struggled to cope, heat and dehydration starting to take their toll. Limbs grew limp, and the eyes, once bright and alert, began to cloud with confusion and distress. The world beyond the windows moved on, unaware of the urgent battle happening just beyond view. The car, meant to be a simple tool for transportation, had become a dangerous trap. The baby's vulnerability highlighted the fragility of life in its most stark and terrifying form, leaving the air heavy with tension and the sense that tragedy could strike at any moment. By mid-afternoon, the tension in the neighborhood began to shift from ordinary calm to uneasy suspicion. A passerby, walking home from a nearby store, noticed something strange about the parked car. At first glance, it seemed normal, just another vehicle in the quiet street. But as she passed, the faint sounds of distress reached her ears. At first, it was subtle, a small, high-pitched whimper that didn't belong in the background hum of daily life. She paused, looking closer through the window. That's when she saw the baby, flushed and restless, strapped into the car seat, struggling against the confines of the harness. Panic rose immediately, a cold knot tightening in her chest. She knocked on the window repeatedly, waving her hands, trying to attract attention from anyone nearby. The baby's cries became more urgent, a sound filled with confusion and fear. The heat inside the car made every second more critical. Other neighbors began to notice her actions, gathering slowly at a safe distance. Some looked worried, unsure of what to do. The reality of the situation began to settle over the street like a dark cloud. This was not an ordinary emergency. A life was in immediate danger. Calls to emergency services were made quickly, voices tense as the dispatcher tried to calm the caller and gather the necessary information. The minutes stretched unbearably long as the heat continued to rise inside the car, trapped and oppressive. The baby's cries became weaker, more desperate, signaling exhaustion and extreme distress. Every second mattered. People in the street tried to find the parents, hoping they had simply stepped away for a moment, unaware of the growing peril. But the driveway remained empty, and no one emerged from the house. The realization began to sink in. The child had been left alone for far too long. When police and paramedics finally arrived, the neighborhood was tense with fear and frustration. Officers moved quickly, assessing the situation and forcing the car open to reach the infant inside. The heat was suffocating, the interior of the vehicle nearly unbearable. Paramedics worked immediately, lifting the baby from the seat and checking for signs of heat stroke, dehydration, and distress. Each action was precise, professional, but there was no disguising the urgency of the moment. The small life that had been trapped now rested in their hands, fragile but clinging desperately to survival. As the baby was taken into emergency care, the gravity of the situation began to emerge. Neighbors whispered in disbelief, some shaking their heads at the parents' negligence, others silently crying at the thought of what could have happened. Social media quickly picked up snippets of the incident, spreading the story through local forums and community groups. The incident, which had begun as a quiet, ordinary morning, had escalated into a frightening reminder of how quickly everyday life could turn into a disaster. The neighborhood that had seemed so safe now felt haunted by the knowledge of how close tragedy had come, and everyone who had witnessed even a small part of it understood the seriousness of what had occurred. As the investigation unfolded, shocking details about the parents' choices began to surface, painting a disturbing picture of neglect and recklessness. Authorities learned that the parents had left their baby in the car for hours while they visited a nearby bar, drinking heavily and ignoring the dangers of the summer heat. Witnesses at the bar described them as careless and distracted, their attention entirely consumed by alcohol and socializing. It became clear that this was not a simple lapse in judgment. The actions suggested a troubling pattern of behavior that placed the child at serious risk. Further examination revealed that this was not the first time the family had engaged in risky or irresponsible behavior. Friends and acquaintances came forward, recounting past instances where alcohol and self-indulgence had taken precedence over child care. Social media posts, texts, and messages painted a vivid picture of a household where boundaries were blurred and responsibility was often secondary. Investigators began to piece together a timeline, uncovering the hours the baby had spent trapped in the sweltering car and the exact sequence of choices that led to the near-tragic incident. The parents' disregard for the infant's well-being became a central focus of the investigation, raising questions about their judgment, priorities, and understanding of danger. Authorities also explored whether there had been attempts to plan or justify the decision. Interviews and evidence suggested that the choice to leave the baby alone was deliberate, not accidental. While some cases of child neglect result from momentary lapses, this situation showed signs of premeditation. The parents had secured the baby in the car, ensuring the child could not escape, and then chose to spend hours away, absorbed in drinking. The severity of the situation became even more apparent as experts analyzed the conditions inside the vehicle. The temperature, air circulation, and duration all pointed to extreme risk capable of causing irreversible harm. The legal implications quickly became a major point of discussion. Charges of child endangerment and reckless conduct were considered almost immediately. Prosecutors highlighted the fact that the parents' choices went beyond negligence. They demonstrated conscious disregard for a vulnerable life. The case also sparked broader debates about accountability, parental responsibility, and the warning signs of dangerous behavior. Experts in child welfare were brought in to discuss the impact of heat, dehydration, and stress on infants, emphasizing how quickly life-threatening situations can develop even under circumstances that might seem ordinary to adults. While the baby survived, the emotional and social consequences were profound. The community struggled to reconcile the image of ordinary neighbors with the reality of their actions. Friends, relatives, and even strangers wrestled with shock, anger, and disbelief. The case became a vivid example of how one decision, seemingly isolated in time and space, could ripple outward to affect an entire neighborhood, raise serious legal consequences, and challenge everyone's understanding of responsibility. It revealed layers of human behavior, from carelessness and indulgence to the instinctual desire to protect and respond when a life is threatened. The story was no longer just about a dangerous choice. It had grown into a powerful, unsettling reflection on the fragility of trust and the consequences of ignoring the needs of the most vulnerable. The aftermath of the incident left a lasting mark on everyone involved. The baby, though physically surviving the ordeal, carried the invisible weight of trauma from those hours spent alone in the heat. Medical professionals monitored the child closely, ensuring there were no long-term physical consequences from dehydration or heat exposure. Psychologists were brought in to evaluate the emotional impact, emphasizing the importance of early intervention to help the baby recover from the fear and confusion experienced during the crisis. While the physical scars were minimal, the emotional and psychological effects were more complex, a reminder that survival alone did not erase the danger faced. The parents faced immediate and serious legal consequences. Authorities charged them with child endangerment and reckless behavior, highlighting the severity of leaving an infant in a life-threatening situation for hours. Court proceedings revealed the details of the case to the public, stirring shock and outrage. Evidence presented in court included witness statements, social media activity, and a careful reconstruction of the day's events, showing a clear pattern of disregard for the child's safety. The legal process served not only to assign responsibility but also as a public warning of the consequences of neglect and poor judgment. Community reaction was intense and deeply emotional. Neighbors who had watched the events unfold were left shaken, struggling to understand how something so ordinary on the surface could conceal such danger. Parents in the neighborhood became more vigilant, checking on their own children and speaking openly about the risks of leaving children unattended in vehicles. Local forums and social media buzzed with discussions, debates, and reflections on responsibility, parental choices, and the fragility of life. The incident became a case study, prompting conversations about how communities could better protect vulnerable children and raise awareness about heat-related dangers. The story also prompted broader public reflection on human behavior and accountability. Experts in child welfare and psychology discussed how ordinary decisions could have extraordinary consequences when carelessness intersected with vulnerability. The parents' actions were analyzed not simply as mistakes, but as choices that reflected a pattern of prioritizing personal desires over the needs of a dependent life. The case highlighted the fine line between oversight and deliberate neglect, showing how quickly the consequences of a single decision could escalate into life-threatening danger. Ultimately, the incident left a community and a family changed forever. The baby's survival became a point of relief, but also a reminder of how close tragedy had come. The neighborhood remained alert, wary, and more conscious of the responsibilities that come with care and supervision. The parents' punishment served as both justice for the child and a cautionary tale to others, illustrating the profound impact of actions taken or ignored in moments of choice. The story became more than a report of danger averted. It became a reflection on responsibility, vulnerability, and the importance of prioritizing the lives of those who depend entirely on others for safety. It left a lingering sense of urgency, a quiet reminder that even in ordinary moments, the stakes of human decisions could be unimaginably high.